The 644th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
And dancing in the arms. The high fiver. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play. Stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys here on a Monday night, here to get you ready for the West Coast road trip Carolina is going on in ACC play, because in the year of our Lord 2026, where conferences now expand outside of the original geographic footprint, Carolina has to play 2 conference games, at Stanford and at Cal. And this is going to be a road trip that's going to, I think, determine maybe the rest of the season for Carolina, set the tone for what this team can achieve. We'll talk about that as we make our way through tonight's edition of the podcast. We'll get you ready for the matchup with Stanford, tell you all you need to know about the Cardinal, look at the game from Carolina's perspective before we give our keys to victory. We start, though, every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to Roy Williams for that pod thought. That thought is, quote, "Don't say I wish I had done that. Think about it and do it," end quote. I really think this is something that applies to head coach Hubert Davis. There's obviously something missing. Carolina is not functioning the way they need to in terms of the point guard spot. You're not getting the production you need if you want to compete for a conference championship, high NCAA tournament seeded and advance deep into the NCAA tournament. And same thing defensively. Carolina, all of a sudden, they still have some pretty good numbers in terms of field goal percentage against. Their defensive rating in KenPom is 39th. This was a top 20 defense, 10, 12 days ago, or really 14 days ago. And in really 2 bad performances, they're barely a top 40 defense. History would suggest you don't play deep in the March with a top 40 defense. And so there are adjustments that need to be made. And my hope is that after another subpar performance, because I'll reiterate what I said after the Wake Forest win. You won the game. The way that you are attacking your work leading up to Stanford should be like after a loss. Because you did not play the way down the stretch you need to play if you want to win the amount of games we want to win this season. And so hopefully, Hubert Davis and this coaching staff, they're not wishing that they're making changes. Hopefully they're thinking about making changes, and hopefully they start applying some changes to be made starting on Wednesday night.
Yeah, and hopefully they've thought about making some change-ups to the lineup. Maybe, as we've said, playing Jonathan Powell a little bit more, maybe Jaden Young playing a little bit more, and maybe less of Kyan Evans and less of Derek Dixon, guys that are really struggling. Maybe you are toying with the idea of having Seth Trimble be the guy that primarily brings the ball up for you on the offensive side or on the offensive end of the floor. Maybe that's ultimately what you're doing. So I think this week, these last couple of days, as you said, hopefully they're approaching it as if they lost that game to Wake Forest. The mindset needs to be about what can we do better. Defensively, I think, they need to figure out a way that they can guard the three more consistently. We've talked about that really since the game against Florida State, but especially after these last two games, you have to be better taking away those shots from the perimeter, make them beat you in a different fashion. If they're going to beat you driving to the basket, well, here's the thing. We know that you have the capability of being able to match them on the other end, whether it's your guard and Seth Trimble matching them by driving to the basket himself, or it's your bigs on the other end that are matching what's going on. It's when you get into one of those games where it's back-to-back games now, you've allowed 14 threes. That's really hard to overcome. I mean, at that rate, you're talking about being outscored, for the team that you're playing scoring 42 points from beyond the arc, and then you having to make that up through what you do in the paint. It's not going to be easy, and it's the reason why Wake Forest was able to stick around in the first half. It's the reason why they were able to close the gap in the second half. Back with the SMU game, it was the reason that SMU was able to keep that game as close as they did and have the lead that they did early in that second half. And then eventually it was the reason why they were able to extend it out. So Carolina's got to be much, much better on the defensive end of the floor. And it's really just about saying to yourself that you're going to do it out there on the floor. You're going to take that away, and don't wish that that's something that this team was better at. So hopefully that's the mindset that Carolina takes going into this game.
Let's set the scene for the matchup with Stanford. Carolina 13-1 all time against the Cardinal. Their lone loss came last year when Stanford beat them in Chapel Hill. A shot pretty much at the buzzer was able to secure a win for Stanford. And it was really one of the telltale signs that Carolina was never really going to find their footing in what was an up and down year as they backed themselves into the NCAA tournament. This is the first ACC road game at Palo Alto, but it's the first time they've played out there since 2017, 2018. Some people will tell you this is the first time they've ever played there. They need to do their homework. Carolina had a home-and-home with Stanford, and they did play a road game out there back when Gerard Haas was their head coach. This year, this edition of Stanford, they bring with them a 13-4 record into the game. They are 2-2 in the league. They are 9-2 at home. Their home losses have come to UNLV and to Notre Dame. They have three players that average double-figure scoring, led by maybe the most under-talked about freshman in all of college basketball, Ibuka Okori, and his 22.1 points per game, 3.7 rebounds, 2.9 assists. He's doing that on 43% shooting from the field, 31% shooting from three. Chisholm Akpara is their second leading scorer, 13.9 points, 3.9 rebounds, 2.2 assists. He is shooting 39% from the field, 30% from three. Then Benny Gieler, their last guy to average double figures, 10.8 points, 2.5 rebounds, 1.8 assists. He is shooting 44% from the field, 43% from behind the three-point line. One thing they do really well defensively, they take away the three-point shot. They rank top 20 in both opponent three-point field goals made per game. They allow just 5.9 made threes per contest, and they rank top 20 in opponent three-point field goal attempts per game. They only allow teams to get off 18.1 shots from behind the arc. KenPom, they come as of recording, they're 80th overall. Their adjusted offensive efficiency rating of 113.0 is 104th. Their adjusted defensive efficiency rating of 101.9 checks in at 59th. Here's the number to monitor leading up to tip. As of right now, they're ranked 73rd in the net. Why is that important? Because as long as they stay inside the top 75, it's a quad one game for Carolina. And they've got, as of today, with 15 ACC games to go, 10 of them right now register as quad one opportunities for Carolina. So there is a chance, to really build a real strong resume. I saw Greg Barnes tweeting out some numbers earlier today from inside Carolina. It's good having him back on the beat. Kind of where Carolina is at right now, they would probably top out at a 4 line, just where they kind of are. And if you kind of project moving forward, and it's not a bad seed. I don't think we'd be upset with being a 4 seed. The expectation would be to get to the second weekend. But there is a chance for you to play yourself to that 3, maybe even as high as that 2 line. I think a 1 seed's probably at this point maybe out of question unless you just win all those quad one games. With some of the resumes that Arizona, Iowa State, UConn, Michigan, Duke, and some others are compiling. But nonetheless, this is a Stanford team that, as of right now, is still early on in the league. We don't know how good they're going to be when we get to the end of the year, when we get to the ACC tournament. But we know that Kyle Smith is a good coach with what he did at Washington State. He beat Carolina a year ago, and after 17 games and 4 conference games, he's got an opponent that measures to be a quad one opponent, and they're going to challenge Carolina in more ways than one on Wednesday night.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, you talk about great freshmen in the sport right now, and there are so many of them, but Abuka Okore has to be right up there with them. I mean, you go back to the game that they played against Virginia Tech. He was phenomenal, scored 31 points in that game. He actually assisted or scored on 40 of Stanford's final 42 points, including the game winner in that game. So that shows you the type of player that he is. He's involved in everything that they do. A lot of people have lauded a quick first step that he has that makes it easy for him to be able to turn the corner, going to make it really difficult for Carolina's defenders to stay in front of him. That's going to be the thing that Carolina's got to do in this game, is you've got to find a way to try to force the ball out of his hands. We've talked about Carolina going up against these teams with these great players. And here recently, Boobie Miller was able to take advantage of Carolina. Really no answers for him, no way to get the ball out of his hands. Corey Washington shooting the ball well from beyond the arc for SMU. That's another guy. Try to get the ball out of his hands. Just deny him and make someone else beat you. Weren't able to do it. And then in the game against Wake Forest, it was really Juke Harris and then Nate Calmese who ends up getting hot in the second half. We'll just try to deny them the basketball, find someone else that can actually beat Carolina if they are going to actually have that happen. And Carolina just hasn't been able to do it. Defensively, they've allowed those guys to go crazy. This is another guy that's more than capable of doing that if Carolina lets him. I mean, he's shooting 43% from the field, 31% from 3. Pretty solid numbers to go along with 22.1 points per game. And so, I mean, he's a guy that really just does everything for this Stanford team. There's a little bit of a drop-off after that, but, one guy that Carolina's got to be aware of is Benny Geeler, guy that shoots 5.5 3-point shots per game, shoots 43%. So that's the other guy that I think that Carolina is going to have to be aware of in this matchup. A guy, as you mentioned, averages 10.8 points per game. But really, I think the big thing is that you just can't let him go off from beyond the arc. He only averages 2.4 makes per game. But as we've seen recently, some of those guys that come in with not the greatest statistical in terms of numbers of threes knocked down from the outside, those guys just go off against Carolina because Carolina gives them such easy looks from the outside. It's the guys with those percentages that you have to worry about. So hopefully Carolina can take advantage of that, because there are some areas where Carolina is going to be much better than them in. This is another team that doesn't really have a ton of size that you're going up against. I mean, yeah, they've got a couple of guys on the roster that are 6'10", but most of their best players are 6'8" or smaller. And, Carolina is going to want to create some of those mismatches. You look at the rebounding numbers for this Stanford team, they're 239th in the country with just 35.4 rebounds per game. Now, interestingly enough, good offensive rebounding group at 12.2 per game. So that's an area that Carolina's got to be buttoned up in. But there are going to be opportunities for Carolina on the glass, some chances to create those extra possessions if Carolina's bigs are ready to go for this game, which you would expect that they will be. And the other thing is, just in general, not a great shooting team. I mean, a team that shoots just 42.7% overall from the field, not good inside of the arc. So if you can run them off of the 3-point line in this game, and even their percentages from three are not necessarily great, but you don't want to risk it. If you can run them off of the perimeter in this game, then you're going to have a chance to put up a good defensive performance and hopefully be able to slow this team down. I mean, guys, this is a team that is coming off of that loss that you talked about to Notre Dame. That loss, they were dominated on the offensive end of the floor by Notre Dame's defense. They had just 40 points in that loss to Notre Dame. It was a 47-40 final. So this is a team that isn't necessarily playing the greatest offensively. Hopefully Carolina can take advantage of that.
You look at this game from Carolina's perspective, they bring with them a 14-2 record on the year. They are 2-1 in ACC play. They actually moved up 3 spots in the AP poll. They're back inside the top 15. They check in at 14th this week. Of course, we know Carolina starting to really play their first real road games of the year. They have just played 2 road games on the year. They won at Kentucky, lost at SMU. They'll play 2 road games this week alone. We mentioned this is a quad 1 game. Carolina is 3-2 right now in quad 1. So a chance to really improve upon that in this matchup. They have 3 players that are currently averaging double-figure scoring, led by, arguably the best or second best freshman in the conference. Caleb Wilson is 19.5 points per game, 11 rebounds, 2.7 assists. He is shooting 57% from the field, 25% from 3. Henry Vassar is back up to second on the team in scoring at 16.9 points, 9.2 rebounds, 2.1 assists. He is shooting 65% from the field and a ridiculous 51% from 3. And then Seth Trimble, now just the last guy to average double figures. He's averaging 15.7 points, 4.1 rebounds, 3.7 assists. He is doing so on 45% shooting from the field, 28% shooting from behind the 3-point line. Carolina's defense still top 10 in opponent field goal percentage against. Teams are shooting just 38% against Carolina, and they're still in the top 10 in opponent 2-point field goal percentage against. Teams are shooting just 43% from inside the 3-point line. Their KenPom ratings are better than Stanford's, but not where you want them to be. They're just 33rd overall in KenPom. They actually dropped 6 spots in the Wake Forest win. They entered Saturday 27th. They exited Saturday 33rd. Their adjusted offensive efficiency rating of 119.9 is 40th in the sport. And then I mentioned that defensive rating, they're allowing 100.0 points per 100 possessions. That's 39th in college basketball, but their net rating is still very healthy. They are 23rd in the net. The discussion topic I really want to tackle, focuses on this West Coast road trip. And really, I look at this as a tone setter for the rest of conference play. Because you got to go out west. So you got to play, 2 – it's unique games just in terms of the fact that we're not used to playing at Stanford. You're not used to playing at Cal. It'll be a 9 o'clock tip on Wednesday night, but that means it's a 6 o'clock tip out there. We play at 4 on Saturday. That means it's a 1 o'clock tip out there. So you can even argue some odd start times, given the fact that with how TV demands what times these games begin. But I mean, With the way Carolina's playing and as good as Stanford has been at home, and as improved as California has been, if Carolina's defensive woes travel, 0-2 is not out of the question for this group. And I think the big, I guess, worry and concern is when Carolina went west last year, Hawaii, Maui, they came back a different team. Now part of it was they played some really good competition, and that competition kicked their butt. These teams are nowhere near as good as the competition that Carolina had to endure during the Maui Invitational. But I do kind of worry, like if Carolina goes out there and they get swept, or even if they split this thing, what it could do to them. What should our expectations be? Because this is the first time in conference play we've had to see them make this road trip. I know Hubert Davis tried to downplay it last week at his press conference, but quite literally, we've never seen Carolina go from playing on the East Coast to playing 2 games on the West Coast during conference play. It's going to be different. It's going to be unique. They're leaving today, so you can tell that they're trying to go ahead and get out there, get adjusted to the time difference and all that. I think on paper, Carolina should go 2-0. They should come back home 16-2. They should come back home, 4-1 in the league. But with the way that they've played defensively, with the way they failed to close out Wake Forest, I do think confidence is kind of shook with how much we should expect and demand from a team that probably isn't playing to what their record is or what their AP rating is either.
I think it's not crazy to think that this team should go 2-0. Because the way that Carolina was playing at times during the non-conference, they are better than both of these teams. And I think that it's okay to still have the expectations that, going into this game, I mean, these two teams, where are they going to finish in the conference standings? Do we believe that for sure one of these teams is going to have a really strong year and make it to the NCAA tournament? If not, then Carolina should definitely be able to go on the road and come away with 2 wins. I think it's so difficult to figure out because, again, there are a lot of teams that right now in the middle of this conference, teams that have 2-2 records in conference, it's a lot of teams beating up on each other that we just don't know how good they necessarily are. So I think you've got to figure that out. But at the same time, I believe that when you look at these matchups, if Carolina is going to challenge to win the ACC regular season, which we believe that they should be one of those teams that should be able to do that, or, even if they're going to finish inside the top 4 and be a team that, we think can finish third, well, you've got to find a way to win these games. I get it, man. Stanford is a team that's playing a lot better out of the gate to begin this season than I think many people believed that they were going to. Same thing with Cal. Cal, going to be a much different challenge. That's a team that shoots the ball a pretty decent amount of times from 3. They also hit it a pretty good percentage from 3s, 36%. So that's certainly going to be its own beast to tame in this one. This game against Stanford on Wednesday, going to be a little bit different in the fact that, Cal doesn't necessarily have that one player that you're looking at and saying, oh, man, this guy's going to potentially go off. He's an all-conference caliber guy. I mean, Day-Day Adams is certainly a good player, but you're not going to have what you're getting in Okori in this game. I think that's the thing that you're going to have to worry about if you're Carolina going into this game. So, I mean, look, my expectations are still high for this group, especially with the fact that you are going to have Caleb getting further away from whatever illness he had in the game against SMU. Henry seems to be back to where he needs to be at after, a couple of lackluster games to begin ACC play. They weren't exactly the best performances, the most consistent. Those first halves in both games weren't necessarily great, but I think he bounced back in the game that we saw on Saturday against Wake Forest, and certainly put together one of his more complete performances of the year. So those guys have me feeling confident going into this road trip that Carolina can still come away with 2 victories. I just don't think it's going to be as easy as we thought these victories were going to be at the start of the year, where we probably looked at these on the schedule and checked those off as, oh, those are probably going to be pretty easy wins for Carolina.
Yeah, look, I say some things that people kind of scoff and they get annoyed when I say this. There's not a scenario that exists where North Carolina basketball should lose to Stanford and California. There's not. They don't have the talent. They don't have the depth. They don't have the coaching expertise that where those schools should beat us. Happened last year, and it was a sign that team was not going to be as good as they should have been, considering what you had in your backcourt. With an accomplished player like R.J. Davis. Maybe I'm just still being too caught up in the moment with how bad they played the final 9 minutes against Wake Forest, and maybe letting what happened in a football game while that game was going on impact the way I feel about my basketball team. Maybe I got to separate the feelings of the two. I have absolutely no confidence they're going to go 2-0. Not with the way that they've defended, because you showed a lack of an adjustment from the SMU game to to the Wake Forest game. And Hubert Davis was, Andrew Jones brought this up in his presser where Seth Trimble said when he talked with the media before Hubert did that he thought that a lot of their defensive rotations and their switching was lazy, and Hubert didn't want to comment on that. Well, if your best perimeter player is saying that, you don't need to hear what context he said it. By God, just agree with him. And then use that to challenge him and challenge the rest of your guys publicly to say, well, guys, we worked on it all week in practice. Why did we not execute the way that we want to, the way that we need to? And I think it really depends on how this thing looks. I think we'll really start to shape how we start to feel about this team, because the metrics are what the metrics are. And the metrics suggest this team is not a championship contender. The metrics suggest that they're not going to, I think, maximize Caleb Wilson's lone season in Chapel Hill. And that right now is the goal. I think Hubert has done enough to kind of quiet the hot seat around him. You let him go 0-2 this week, though, that'll be a conversation that'll start to heat up. I don't think they're going to be in danger of missing the NCAA tournament. I think they're going to get a really good seed and probably win at least a game or two. So I think we've kind of put that kind of worry to the back burner. But like last year, it became so much about making sure you maximize R.J. Davis's final year. You didn't do that. Well, now you've got this one-and-done freshman that is doing like historic things. Like he's going to force us to have the conversation, is he the best freshman of all time? And yet I'm sitting here worried about can we go on the road and make sure we beat Stanford and Cal? And I just don't think I should feel that way as a fan. If they get back to playing the way that they're capable of defensively, then I think this kind of goes and we start to feel different, because the offense is just going to be what the offense is. They're a team that plays inside out. When they shoot the three really, really well, they literally can play with anybody in the country. When they struggle to make perimeter shots, combined with their poor free throw shooting, we know that they're going to have to win games with their defense. And they should know that, which is why there shouldn't be the defensive issues that exist, because this roster wasn't put together with the mindset of winning games the way that, Purdue wins games, where they're just scoring 85, 90 points on a consistent basis, the way some other teams are built. So going to be watching very closely. This is, we're at that point of the year where now you're playing quad one games. We're in the middle of February. NCAA tournament seeding is going to be a conversation that we're having. Positioning for the ACC tournament, something we're going to be talking about. And Carolina, just quite simply, they have to start playing better. I think they're capable of doing that, which is the most important thing. Last year, I had no belief they could get better. They just were what they were. I think this team can play better than what they're playing. They've just kind of got to, fix a few things, make some few minor tweaks, adjustments, pivots, as Hubert likes to say, and start to find their best basketball. Let's give our keys to the game before we make our predictions for this one. The first thing I wrote down was quite simply guard, Ibeka Corey. And look, when you're averaging 22 points per game, he's going to get his in some capacity. He's going to make a couple of shots where you're going to say, ain't nothing you can do about that. That's a good player. But I don't want to come out of this game and listening to Seth Trimble have to say, yeah, we switched lousy, or we didn't put pressure on the ball. Something Hubert Davis talked about a lot after the Wake Forest game. Again, that was, on his own fault. What did Carolina do in the first half? Pretty much after every dead ball situation, they picked up full court. They put pressure on the ball in the backcourt, and it impacted the way Wake Forest wanted to play offense. You went away from that in the second half. It's not a surprise to me. Your 15-point lead went away. So, yes, Seth Trimble needs to guard him, but use the other bodies at your disposal, like a Jonathan Powell. Jaden Young, he's earned a role by playing good perimeter defense. Don't be afraid to give him a bigger role than what he's had so far. And even with Kyan Evans and Derek Dixon, I'd throw as many bodies at him that are fresh to try to wear him down. Quite simply, you cannot let him do what Boopie Miller did against you, or what, Juke Harris or Nate Calmes did against you, which have 27-plus points on efficient shooting nights. If he does that, if he's the best player on the floor and he's controlling the game, then guess what? Carolina's going to find themselves in a dogfight at the final media timeout. If the other guys have to make shots to beat us, then that's how we need to go down losing. But this cannot be the third straight game we identify their best player, and their best player has one of the best nights he's had all season long.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It can't be a statement game from a Corey who, has had a really good season. He's a really good player. But at some point, you've got to be able to take away the other team's best player. I mean, there are teams that are looking to do the same thing to you. You've taken your own best player away from some of these contests here in the last two games, in the second half of games. That's not going to happen with a team like Stanford, who really just runs off of what a Corey does. So in order to do that, it's up to you guys to really bring it to the table for 40 minutes here. I thought early in the game against Wake Forest, for the most part, they did a pretty decent job against Calmes. Juke Harris was really able to do what he wanted for the entire day. So he was going to be another guy that was going to have a really strong performance. But that's the thing. Once you let Calmes start going off, that was what completely changed the game. This is one of those games where Corey, I mean, we've seen it so far this year. He's been able to completely take over certain games, certain halves of games. That's what Carolina has to avoid in this one, is especially if you're going to let him go off, if you're going to let him have a successful night in one of the halves, well, then let him go crazy in the first half and then find a way to take the ball out of his hands in the second half. Make someone else beat you in the second half. But I would prefer a full game where Carolina is just able to throw the best player on the floor off. We saw this earlier in the season. There were teams, and I get it, some of these teams were mid-major teams, but Carolina was really able to throw some of their best players off of what they were normally used to doing. I mean, we saw it quite a few times in the non-conference that Carolina was able to do that. I mean, go back to the game against Kansas. Carolina did a pretty decent job guarding Darren Peterson and forced him to take some really tough shots. Now, if they go down, it is what it is. But that's the thing. It hasn't felt like things have been nearly as difficult for some of these guys here recently. It felt like Boopie Miller, everything was easy on him. He could get wherever he wanted to go on the floor and pick out his shot. It felt the same way with Calmes the other day in the second half. Don't let that happen again in this game. And I think it's going to be up to all of those guys, as you mentioned, on the perimeter. It's Trimble. It's Powell. It's Jaden Young, maybe stepping up after what we saw from him the other day. And it's even Kyan Evans and Derek Dixon. All of those guys are probably going to have to contribute at some point, especially if they're switching as much as they are. And hey, if you were lazy with your switching in that game, well, then you need to realize that there's still going to be a ton of switching. That's what Hubert Davis is going to want. There's still going to be a ton of that in this game. You better do a better job of switching in this game. Better have a much better effort in that area against a Corey, or else he's going to hurt you for most of the night.
Second key I wrote down was make the most of your perimeter looks. We'll reiterate what we mentioned when we broke down Stanford. They are top 20 in opponent three-point field goal makes and attempts per game. They only allow 5.9 makes. They only allow 18.1 attempts. So their defensive game plan, their mindset is they want to run teams off the three-point line. Honestly, Hubert Davis and his staff should watch how they defend the three-point line and implement some of that into the way that we play defense, because we don't value three-point defense the way that we should in the modern game. But what that translates to is the right guys need to take the three-point shots and the majority of those three-point shots. And I'll list those guys for you in case you're not aware who those guys should be. Those guys should be Henry Vassar. Those guys should be Jonathan Powell. And depending on the night, Jaden Young with the mixture of Kyan Evans and Seth Trimble. Mainly because if Kyan Evans quits shooting the three-point shot, then people are going to keep on. I mean, then there's going to be no respect for him on the floor as an offensive player. That's the only thing that he can really do. He doesn't do it very well. I mean, he bricked the wide open three off the side of the backboard the other night. But we need his shooting. At some point, maybe this kid that we're paying $2 million will shoot the ball the way that he's getting paid to do so. But this cannot be a game where Jared Stevenson is chucking threes. This cannot be a game where, if guys don't have their perimeter shot falling, they're settling for perimeter shots. It needs to be a controlled perimeter attack with the guys that you feel the most comfortable and confident shooting the perimeter balls. And that starts, it's sad that it starts with your big man and Henry Vassar, but by God, he's shooting 51% on a relatively high volume. Jonathan Powell, I think, is, the best shooter on this roster. And he needs to shoot it more than twice per game. And Jaden Young showed you the other night why I liked him coming in from Virginia Tech. He can be someone that, can be a weapon from the perimeter. Same thing with Seth Trimble. So, look, they're going to take away a lot of perimeter looks. Hopefully they take away the ones that Jared Stevenson wants to look at. With that being said, though, Carolina has to maximize the three-point shot attempts that they get, make sure the right guys are taking the right threes, because the stats would suggest there's not going to be a lot of perimeter offense there for them to have to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that you look at coming into this game is how good they are on the perimeter defensively. So it's just about efficiency, man. It's about the guys that are taking those shots being able to knock down those shots. And so you're right. It really comes down to the right guys taking those shots and really taking them in the right moments. This is a team that it's felt like really since that Florida State game, there were moments in every game where they decided, you know what, we're going to continually pass the ball around the perimeter, and we're just going to settle for outside looks. This is a team that's not going to let you do that. They're going to contest everything from the outside. And so you've got to be ready to take what they're giving you, which is probably going to be easy lanes to the basket at times. I mean, you look at some of their other stats on the defensive end of the floor. It's not like this is a defensive juggernaut. This is still a team that's allowing teams to shoot 44.8% from the field overall, which is 253rd in the country. So they are not an overly efficient defensive team when it comes to protecting the paint. That's an area where teams are able to have a lot of success. So that's where you've got to go with the basketball. But when you get those opportunities from the outside, you've got to be able to take advantage of that. You're not coming into this game and hitting 14 threes like opponents have done to you in these last two games. I don't see you putting that many three-pointers up. I'm not 14. You'll probably put up more than that. But I don't see you putting up a big enough volume at the rate that you've been shooting it to be able to knock down 14 threes. At the same time, this is one of those games where if you can hit, 7, 8, 9 threes, you probably feel good about your chances to win this game with what you're doing in the other areas, because they are going to give you lanes to the basket. They are going to put you on the free throw line pretty often. That's certainly something that Carolina has to be able to take advantage of in this game. But, hopefully this is one of those games where, we see the right rotations, the rotations that we've talked about over the last two shows, where you're seeing more Jonathan Powell, you're seeing more Jaden Young, seeing a little less Luka Bogovac, and hopefully that will allow Carolina to be a little bit more efficient from the outside in this game against Stanford.
Last key to the game that I wrote down, it's one of the keys every time you go on the road, especially for this team because they struggle with it at times. It's limit your turnovers and more importantly, make your free throws. You mentioned that they're going to put you at the foul line. They don't have a lot of size and resistance on the interior, which means that they're going to foul you. And when they look at the numbers, they'll be justified because they'll look at a bad free throw shooting team and sometimes committing that foul means you're not going to give up it's not going to give up a bucket, and that's really important. Those are two things that if Carolina would have lost against Wake Forest, we would have talked about. You had double-digit turnovers, you had double-digit free throw misses, and you took 30 free throws. This can't happen, man. You can't give as many free points away as you gave to an opponent, and you can't leave as many empty possessions as you did at the foul line, especially in a league that's better. Whereas you mentioned, you got 15 games left in league play, 10 of them are against quad one opponents. That's you want to win quad one games. You take care of the ball, you make your free throws, you do all the little things. It's just like in football where winning the trenches, the special teams. Same thing in basketball. It's just it just looks different. And so the turnovers haven't really been an issue. Then they crop up the other night. The big thing is the foul shooting because Carolina's getting to the foul line, and that's the most frustrating thing. If they were going like 8 for 11 or 12 of 17, well, okay, you're still upset, you're still frustrated. But Carolina's getting to the foul line pretty frequently because not too many teams can handle Wilson. Not many teams can handle Vassar. And then when Seth Trimble gets downhill, how many people can stay in front of him? Those guys are getting to the line. The problem is those guys are missing foul shots. But it's not just them. It's your other guards as well, guys that you should count to shoot 80+% from the charity stripe. So, this is the last key I wrote down. It might be the most important thing because if this game is close late, how confident are we going to be that Carolina can win it at the foul line? Because they almost lost it at the foul line their night against Wake Forest.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the area that I'm just not confident in going into this game. We have figured out by this point in the season what this team is. They are not a good foul shooting team. And I hate to say it. I hope that they can prove me wrong and that all of a sudden this is a team that finds their stride in that area. But when you've gotten to this point in the season, you start to get an identity for your team. And that's one of the things that unfortunately is part of the identity with this team is that they just can't shoot foul shots consistently. For me, I mean, as you said, it's really on the guards, man. Seth Trimble, you got to make your free throws. Kyan Evans, when you get to the free throw line, you've got to be able to make shots there. Derek Dixon, Jaden Young, those are guys that when they get there, they have to be able to capitalize. Jonathan Powell, he didn't get there the other night, but those are guys that you're hoping are going to go. If they get there, like the other night, if you get there twice, you're hoping that Derek Dixon and Jaden Young, well, they could give you 2 of 2 from the foul line. And it just doesn't seem that way because we know that Caleb and Henry, they're going to get to the foul line pretty often, but they're not going to be perfect from the foul stripe. You need more than just one guy. In the case of the game against Wake Forest, it was Jaron Stevenson. He hits 2 shots at the end of the game. That's the only reason that it was a 3-point game, or else that shot from Cal Mees at the end, if that ends up going home, that would have been to beat you. So, I mean, you can't be relying on Jaron Stevenson to be a guy that's going to get to the line all that often and be your one consistent free throw shooter. You need your other guards to be able to do that as well. And the turnover issues, yeah, that was something that disappeared for a while from this group, but that was something that we saw early in the season that was a little bit scary. You're just hoping that's not a problem that crops back up. This is one of those games that hopefully the coaching staff, again, sort of stressing it to them. Stanford, a team that forces 14.1 turnovers per game from their opponents. So this is, again, what seems like a ridiculous stretch here to start conference play where you're going up against these teams that are forcing a ridiculous amount of turnovers. That's how they stay in games. Carolina's got to protect the ball because that was a big part of the reason why the other day they were, in as close of a game as they were at times early in the game with Wake Forest was because they were turning the ball over at a high rate and they were allowing them to knock down threes. Don't let that be the recipe again in this game because, transition defense-wise, Carolina hasn't been perfect either. So you need to make sure that you're holding on to the basketball and taking care of it. But I'm with you, man. The most important thing that they've got to be able to do is shoot foul shots consistently because you look at the team that you're playing in this one on the other end of the floor, they're going to be getting to the foul line at a pretty decent clip as well, judging off of their numbers this year. And they're a team that does shoot 72.8%. So not great, but definitely much better than where you are as a team right now.
Carolina enters the game with a 64.8% chance to win. That according to ESPN's analytics. We'll make it easy. We'll round it up to 65%. I'll let you go first. Who wins the game and why?
Yeah, I think Carolina gets the win, but I'm going to tell you, I don't feel like it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be another one of these grinded out games because I think Corey is going to be able to really get what he wants. I just don't trust this team right now defensively against the three. I think this is another game where you'll probably see them allow double-digit threes, but I think there's just enough there because of the size that Carolina has inside and the talent gap overall that Carolina is going to have in this game. I think they'll be able to attack the lane at a pretty high rate with Seth Trimble, hopefully with some of the other guys in that backcourt, but your big men are going to be what are going to carry you in this game. I'm expecting big games once again from Caleb Wilson and from Henry Vassar, even though they played well in that last game. I think Caleb's going to be motivated by the fact that he didn't see the ball a lot late. I think Henry going to be motivated that the team overall didn't perform up to the standard. And so I think you're going to see good performances from them. It'll be enough in the end, but I do think it's going to be another close game for Carolina that will probably come back on here and feel frustrated in certain areas.
Yeah, I think Carolina wins as well, mainly because they've got the two best players, and hopefully the message got across to them. Give those guys the basketball. And look, we can do it the Hubert Davis way, give them the Farton basketball, or we can do it the way that most people talk, and we can use the better F word there. But I think those guys continue to have big games. They continue to power Carolina, and I think when it's all said and done, Carolina gets the job done, and they avenge a loss last year, and they don't make us feel like we waste our time staying up till probably 11:30 watching them play on Wednesday night. Give me the Heels on the road in Maples Pavilion to improve to 15-2, 3-1 in the league, and more importantly, 4-2 in quad one games. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. In the meantime, guys, we'll direct you guys to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Full coverage of that game will be found on the website. Preview will go up Wednesday morning. Because of the late game, we'll be back Thursday morning with the game recap, as I and Anthony continue to take you through the basketball season. We kind of had to tag team this thing with some of my work obligations, but now that football season is over for me, should be able to devote all of my attention back to this basketball team and cover them the way that you all have expected. You expect us to cover them over the years. We also got you covered football side of things as well. A bunch of news with the transfer portal. The portal closes on Friday. So Carolina is frantically looking to put their roster together. Still have some late additions to the portal. Still have some late entries into the portal. All that coverage has been found. HeelToughBlog.com, your home for the best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Just search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the year. If you're a video consumer of the podcast, best way to keep up with us, like and follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. The second we go live, you'll get notified on your mobile device. You can jump in and be a part of the conversation. With that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always,